the chat snap or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that is, but
What was it? I guess what was it like having such a big shift and change? So you think, like, with Facebook starting sort of that social media fire, and then everything within like 15 years kind of skyrocketed. Now you have like 18 different social media types, right? How is that different from, I don't know, the 70s, 1870s?
Cal could have been the 90s, so and into the early 2000s. The short answer is we didn't have that. We had, I suppose, the nightmare was, and I don't see this happen. I shouldn't say. I guess I did suffer through some of that. But you go to people's homes, and usually these were the adults. We were the kids, and they would get a slide projector out and show them the picture of their trip to Fiji or something.
Yeah, and actually that's been a interesting question for, I think, because I mean, with the internet exploding the way it exploded in the early 2000s, that must have been a whole wild ride trying to decipher what you let your kids start with and figure out on the internet versus what they don't. Because Ashley and I are thinking about, okay, so, eventually our son is going to be on the internet and probably a lot younger than when we were on the internet. And then it comes down to, what should his access be? What should he be able to do? How does that affect his social life with his friends? There's so many different aspects to it now.
Yeah, and Mom and I don't give a shit. Not our problem.
Sure.
We never had that problem. We had, our rule at home was, because we finally got real cable TV by 2005, 2006. I think we
remember that was a big moment for me.
Well, we had basic cable, which meant I didn't want to deal with an antenna on the roof. But but we had cable come in, but just the basic channels and maybe a few others like Travel Channel. Woo, that was cool. But it was basic cable. I had to buy myself down to that. They would say, "Here's your package." Like, I want a cheaper package. Well, we can do this one, but it's only 8 channels. I'll take it. Family of 5 kids. I can't afford the cable, the H. You go to work and people will say, "Hey, did you see such and such in HBO?" I was like, I can't afford HBO.
I watched The Amazing Race.
Yeah, exactly. We had to buy network TV. So we had cable. Then we expanded it somewhere by 2005 or something. I don't know what it was, but no, we didn't have that stuff. The people, it was out there. And everyone else had it, but we just didn't. So it was, and you guys didn't notice it much. I think it would be like Nickelodeon, or it's a couple of kid channels that was on there, but that was the extent.
When we got Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and all those, that was a big moment for me. That was big.
And but we didn't have real internet until 2005. In fact, the rule was no TV. If you recall, we had no TVs in your bedroom, right? That was really kind of the goal initially. And that was because we were afraid that, we had 2 family rooms. Okay. It wasn't a small house. We had 2 family rooms. So it was like, okay, you can watch in the rooms, but we can at least see you. We can be out and about, that kind of thing. And, so that was the reason. Now, eventually you can stream stuff on your computer. So, it's like no TV. It's like, you're like, okay, like, wait, that's not fair. So
you're like, wait.
Yeah, we got outsmarted. So the evolution of technology, we didn't deal with the internet much with you guys, and we didn't care. And at some point, you just get realistic. We never had young kids with the internet, so I don't know how you guys are going to do that. It's an
interesting challenge for sure, because our child doesn't need that kind of exposure that young, but also, they're at school and everybody has the same platforms, what have you. And I don't know how that's going to interact. And our kid's going to be like, oh, I want this social media. And then I'm the bad guy for saying, you don't need this social media, and so on and so forth. So it's like, is that battle worth it? Or is it just, like, this isn't that big a deal. Just let them have, the Facebook of their generation, what that might be. Right. And deal with any potential fallout later. And by potential fallout, I think something interesting that has been done is they're seeing now how Instagram affects the mood and behaviors of young children, teenagers to young adults.
Oh, sure.
It's bad. It's a big source of either depression or anxiety among those age groups. And it's right. and it's a weird circle where it's like, okay, I don't want to expose my kid to that, but then like, am I outcasting him if he doesn't? You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's just
That's
kind of one
true.
of
Can
those
you hear
things that
me?
I kind of have to loop through. Did I lose you? Uh oh, you lost me. Uh oh. Hello. Uh oh. This is not good. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, you are.
Oh, there we go. Okay,
Is it
I'm
back?
back.
Okay.
I'm back. I don't know what all there got recorded and what didn't, but long
Last I
story
saw,
short,
you did this and you froze.
yeah,
It was
I don't know.
adorable. Yeah.
Right? Do I let my kid have anxiety and depression like the rest of us, or do I spare them and then take the hatred for them? So I don't
I
know. Screw
think,
it. Give my kid anxiety. I guess that's gonna
yeah.
happen regardless.
Well, I mean, it's going to be both. It's going to be anxiety and hatred. Welcome
Yeah,
to this. Welcome to our
uh,
channel,
a
right? That's the
double
purpose
whammy.
of. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Welcome to our. We wouldn't be talking like this if it weren't the case. So,
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, uh, it depends where you are. I think you have example with your older sister who has kids,
sure.
one who's a teenager, etc. They live in a smaller town. I think they did a good job of keeping their
Mitigate.
life smaller. Yeah, I mean, in the sense, I don't want to say that they're sheltered, but they keeping their life smaller,
Yeah.
which even then I think is hard because I think from what I gather, the kids' friends are more open or more opportunity, and so it can be done. I mean, you just got to know what you're up against. I think you look into it. At the end of the day, it's society as it is now. You have to grapple with that, and I suppose, and no matter what, eventually they'll be again by the time they're 18 and then the young adult, they'll be into social media and everything else, and you're going to have to deal with it. And raising adult
Yep.
children is a lot harder than raising children. So I don't. That's a good question. What do you guys plan on doing? I mean, you know,
So it's interesting. We are at the moment. We're gonna withhold. We don't want to introduce a tablet or anything like that. I think from the get go. I know a lot of families do, and it's a great resource for new parents to, I think, entertain and even educate their kids. Um, However, I don't think that's the direction we want to go, but that's because her and I have such fond memories of not having, I guess, that immediate access, right? We want to ensure that our kid is being active and hanging out with kids their own age. And, maybe it manifests into itself into a tablet at some point because it's just easier, but who knows? Ideally, we stay away from it, but we don't know. And then in terms of cell phone and social media access worldwide, I mean, probably it's going to happen regardless around 9 or 10, right? I mean,
probably.
it's just, I think that's just kind of the norm these days is, it's, you just low jack your kid, right? It's basically what
Pretty much.
it is.
I
Um,
I will say for us when it came to cell phones, and that happened pretty quickly in our household. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 30 something. So you should wait. Well, it doesn't work that way. I mean,
right.
you had your first cell phone somewhere around 9 or 10, and I don't want to say
Yeah,
that
something
was
like
late,
that.
but
11, 9 to 11. So when I was playing soccer.
exactly. And
Yeah,
it was
middle
more,
school.
and mind you, this is the time that mom had to drive 100 miles a day, 3 times a week to get all of you kids to your, literally 100 miles a day,
Right,
to your
right, right.
events, whether it was fencing, cheerleading, scouts, soccer. I mean, for Evan, he just sat in the back seat and watched TV, but, which now, hey, wait a minute, that actually explains a lot. But anyway,
Okay.
so, and it was at that point that we needed you were going to be left at the field up to might get dark and that kind of thing, and if you got left early, you want to make sure you had a
Right.
phone, so you had your own phone. So that's what it was really and now at that time you really couldn't low jack the phone. Now you can, so it's even a better
Yeah.
reason to have it. So it's a good
And
point.
they're very accessible comparatively.
They're very
Very
what?
accessible nowadays.
Yeah, yeah,
They're very
exactly.
accessible.
Well, you put yourself, at least as a father, for me, I put myself in the position of I'm not letting my kid have a cell phone on the soccer field, even though he's in the soccer field by himself and blah, 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 or whatever it is at 9 years old, 10 years old, we don't know, we have to rush back. So we'll just take the risk. And then something happens to you and like crap, for $10 a month, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
It really was, I mean, we don't really look at it monetarily that way, but you really thought about it like, well,
I
it's
guess I'm just not
accessible.
worth $10 a month. That's just what it's
No, that's not true.
I'm
You were worth $10 a
99
15,
a month.
15, 15. No, not $15. That's crazy talk. But $10, sure. Something like that. It was you could just add it to the account. It was always my old phone. It was,
Yeah.
it wasn't a new phone
But
typically.
you had to
Although
pay
you,
for minutes. You had to pay for texting. I don't even know how that even happens these days, right? Like the idea of having to pay for minutes or texting is not a concept anymore.
that's correct. Data is the thing.
Data is the
Uh,
thing, and that makes a
yeah.
little more sense, I guess. But so did you just like prepay like 100 minutes for the month? The minutes roll over. Was that like a big selling point? Was rolled
Yes.
over minutes?
Something like that. Something like that. I think it was. It would have been like, Dad, I'm left the field. I can get pick me up. I'm going to be called. Bye. Click. Whew, good. There was less than a minute. Whew, boy, we saved.
All right.
Um, but there had to be strategy. But that's how it was done. I mean, cell phones, they had to make sense. Eventually, they did financially. I mean, gotten to a
Yep.
point now that the amount that we pay. Of course, we do have quite a family plan. When I call Verizon, which we've been with for 20 something years on that same account,
Right.
right? I call Verizon and say, hey, can you look on my account? I got to see if I can get a free phone or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And every time they go, ooh, wow, you have lots of devices. Like, yes, welcome to my family. So we have, I don't know, probably I think 11 devices, 10
A
devices.
lot.
So when you get the bill, it's like, ooh, that's a lot of money. But at the same time, it's a cost that you just have to pay. I mean,
Yeah.
I know you guys reimburse that kind of thing, but the point is that insofar as the bill amount, it's like yeah, you have to pay for it and deal with it. So,
Right.
but eventually it became part of the family plan kind of thing. I mean, you guys, I have to say that you guys grew up in an area that was relatively affluent, uh, and
Right.
uh, and we were not without means. We could do things. We were just cheaper or more thoughtful about how we spent money because there were so many of us. And your mom was a stay-at-home mom. It wasn't like we had two big careers, generating income. It was my career, which was cool. It was good. I like what I do, but mom stayed home with you guys for a good 16 years solid. And so it really was, we had to be thoughtful about things. So that's why cable TV, HBO, Showtime is like,
Right.
oh, look, if mom and I had one, maybe two kids, we'd have a lot more trips to Europe and we would have had Showtime and HBO a lot sooner. But Ryan, we sacrificed Showtime to have you, and that's what's important. And that's
I
that's
I came along and they said, "All right, no, we'll try again. We'll try
yeah.
again." Yeah, no, this one isn't it. This one's
Yeah,
wrong.
exactly. It was like, can we get another one? So,
Yeah,
and and
we need a mulligan.
we get a mulligan. So we had Emma,
Yeah,
and then we had another mulligan without asking for it. But anyway, but it's all good. But that's how you had to be thoughtful. But I have to admit for you guys, when it came to technology or things or what do you call it? Arcade phone gaming systems. I guess what they call them,
yeah,
like gaming systems or games
yeah.
themselves.
That's what they call them. Dad.
Yeah, you whippersnappers call them gaming systems, I
Yeah,
guess. So,
we have big arcade things, the joystick and buttons.
boom, boom.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was
exactly.
great. Yeah.
Really,
Um,
gaming really hasn't changed since then.
but you guys were very good about. You might sometimes ask us, hey, my friends got two gaming systems, and why don't we? It's like, well, because we got a bigger family, and we chose mom to stay home, and you guys were like, oh, okay. It was never a matter of I want, I want. You guys were really good. All of you were very good about not demanding or asking or guilting us for stuff. So we managed well. So despite all of that and the pressure you might
Mhm.
have at school, et cetera, whether it was cell phones or they got the new phone, you got an old and busted phone, whatever, it worked. But the gaming system, same things. We would get them updated from time to time. But getting you a game, it was your birthday, maybe out of
Yeah,
the blue, randomly would get you something, and you were blown away, like, oh, I can have it today. Yes, but you,
I was thinking about that recently. Maybe not today, a couple of days ago. I was thinking about this recently, in the sense that one, we always had some sort of updated gaming console. Um,
yep,
to the extent that it was near, when the new one came out. It might not have been, the day of here's the new console, but it
right,
was close enough there. And I think, and back in the early 2000s, having the console immediately as it came out mattered less than it does now. But that's a whole different conversation for probably a different person. But um, I do remember having that access, and that fostered my own enjoyment and love and now hobby of video gaming in general. So that was very nice and great, and I hope I can foster something, whatever. My son, dear God, I hope it's not cars.
Oh,
Whatever, whatever his
that would be so
hobby
cool. Ooh, that'd be cool.
turn out to be. But I remember, yes, right. Video games themselves were relatively sparse. It was, here's either like the value section where we're buying used for $15 or less. And I didn't care. I was whatever age, right? I was like, yeah, a new video game, cool, let's do it. But I also remember whenever I needed to buy a mature rated game, it would always be that very bashful, like, hey Dad, can I get this one? And you'd be like, well, okay, what is it rated? And then it was one of the more mature games at the time. And I think you didn't really care for them, especially once I reached like high school age.
I don't care.
You're like whatever. But I remember being like, but I want it, and I didn't really know how to describe to you to allow me to play something with a lot of gore and cussing and possibly nudity, and how to really make a good argument for a 12-year-old why that might be.
You assume I knew what was in the game. I'm not into gaming, so to me it's like it's mature for some reason. I don't know, but
Yeah,
so I didn't. I don't know, at the end of the day, I mean, I think we have to be thoughtful. Keep in mind when you parent, and we're switching the subject a little bit, but to give you an
yeah,
idea, we create boundaries, right? We talked about this, and we create boundaries. That's our job. Is you have to understand what the boundaries are and where they are, and then you have to decide if you cross them or not. So a lot of times we have to maintain that discipline, even though we're like,
right,
we don't really care. And it could be your mother, I don't care. But we both have to be like, stay disciplined because the kids will believe that that's normal and it's not.
right.
So you have to, we didn't want to over shelter you, but we had to make sure you understood what the boundaries are like anything else. It's not about your child doing the right thing or the wrong thing. It's instructing them what the difference is and where the boundaries are,
Mm.
and then letting them be an individual and they exercise it. And as they get older, they learn because of what you've done. So you had to set the boundaries, and those are the boundaries. Mom was
Yeah,
particular about no rated R movie until you were older and things, and it was boundary things that we had to set. And sometimes it was like, oh, we set the boundary so tight they need to loosen up a little bit,
mm.
namely with one of your siblings. But it's like loosen up, will you? And so we were too successful sometimes. But those are the things we dealt with. But with the games and the technology, you guys are good about that. I think you had other friends who had games. I don't know what it is. We would do things. That's why we did the shoot. What was it? Where you'd rent games.
Yeah.
Remember?
The,
Yeah.
yeah, I would ride my bike to Hollywood Video,
Oh, that was one way to
right?
do it. Yeah.
Hollywood Video or Blockbuster or whatever it was, and I'd call you when I was there. Because if I was already there, you'd be much more inclined to have it happen than if I had tried to convince you to go there in the first place. And I knew you were not thrilled that that was my tactic. But it's how I got it. I was like, oh, I'm already here, Dad. Why don't you just come on down and get me something?
Yeah, well, whatever. I mean, that's an issue. The key one I think that was important and is a lesson you've learned and you still do. And I tell people this all the time, by the way, still.
Mm.
And by the way, it has cost me a fortune in lemonade and cookies.
Yeah,
And that is when you wanted something, you basically, of course, with our money, which is not much, you'd make lemonade and brownies.
yeah,
You'd go into the street, and I mean, you had it down. I mean, it was kind of like I would tell you, why don't you put it over here? No, Dad, if I put it in the island, in the median here, I get traffic coming and going. And I said, well, how much are you charging? It was $1.75. Well, why don't you do 150 or $1 or two? He says, because what I do is $1.75. People just pay me $2 and then $25 tip automatically. If I get $2 automatically, it looks like they're getting a deal. And you were like 8, right? Or
yeah.
9. And you would set that up. There were times you would bring your little brother around because he was so cute with his bowl haircut. And you'd sit him there, stop traffic. People would pay. I mean, but you worked it yourself. That was it. I mean, it wasn't like we said you must earn it yourself and everyone should get a job. In fact, Mom and I were not real disciplinarians on money in the sense of we gave you allowance or didn't give you allowance. It was if you needed money, you had it. If you had it. If you needed something, that's fine. That's why we randomly bought games. If you went to a birthday party, we bought the gift to go to the birthday party. If you wanted a bike, we'd eventually get some kind of a bike. But we
If
did.
we're gonna talk allowance, hold on, because I'm gonna tangent here now. Because looking back,
Mm-hmm.
I had access to the money that I needed, not necessarily the money that I wanted.
Yeah, okay,
And
I'll go with that.
and looking back, that was right. Obviously, we were very lucky the way we grew up and the things that we had.
Yeah, you were very fortunate.
Now, I've got to preface everything before I make the left turn into here's the problem. Was every now and then, and I don't know if it was you or if it was mom or it was a combination of both of you, one of you would always bring up this idea of allowance. Be like, oh, you guys will give you, this idea came around once every 3 or 4 years, maybe.
That's correct.
You always bring up this idea of allowance.
Correct.
And whenever we touched base about allowance again within the next couple of weeks, you're like, what do you mean allowance? These are chores that you have to do anyway. And we're like, well, then why are we talking about allowance in the first place? If you're just not going to give it to me, then just don't tell me that there's going to be allowance. Just tell me to do the chores.
Well, first of all, you weren't getting allowance to do chores. You did chores because you lived in the house, regardless.
Right. The issue wasn't the lack of money you provided. The issue was telling us that there was going to be an allowance, and there never was.
Well, okay, whatever. I told you. I told you.
They're going to get paid.
In the course of 33 years, we've made 5 mistakes. That was one of them. So,
and then my other 4 siblings are the other 4. I got it. Yes.
I didn't see that coming. But anyway, no, we you have to remember there's a certain discipline of doling out allowance with 5 kids, and you met your siblings, and so the dynamic is different with each. So with you would probably be the happiest to, I'll take it and run. Evan would be, the youngest. He'd probably say, "Oh, I don't need it. I don't need it." And then we double it because we felt sorry for him. But your brother, your older brother, would negotiate as to, I think I'm short, and you're paying me short, and here's why. It was difficult to administer, to be honest with you. And mom and I were good at many things, but administering things like that on a flow basis, not our strength. So you are correct. I do recall that. At the end of the day, though, you wanted for nothing, but because you had your needs covered, some of your wants, but we didn't spoil you. And I think that's
right.
That's the point, right? You actually.
Well, I think spoiled is a relative term. You talk to my wife, she'll tell you I'm spoiled till Sunday. So
yeah,
it is. I think spoiled is relative to how the person grows up.
The way she tells it, with the minute you said, yeah, one time when I snowboarded, it was done. It was done. Like if you ever snowboarded, you were not living a hard life. So that's her perspective.
And to be fair, she's had her share of hardships that I have definitely never had.
Totally understand. And it's not fair to gauge in that way. She's had she's had quite an extraordinary life, and as a result, she's an extraordinary woman. So I appreciate that. But we weren't too focused on that as much. So what really surprised us, though, as a result, as you guys became adults, is you guys became very aware of money anyway. Let's be clear, of my 3 oldest children, all of whom are married, all of them have kids or will soon have kids, you're all homeowners. That wasn't like we pushed it on you. Somehow you guys did that. You kind of had a good sense of fiscal responsibility. I think part of it is we sent you off to college, pretty much all of you, on your own, and you had to realize that you could not just go out buy pizza. You actually had to eat from the cafeteria because there was no money left for pizza to go outside or whatever it was. And all of you learned quickly that you had to work for the money a little bit. You all had side jobs while in college. To offset some of the costs, and mostly the living costs, that if you wanted something great, but we got the basics done. So somehow you guys all have done quite well. So my point here is we were able to meter, how much you guys got and without the guilt, but we think you got the gaming system, and should we get him a game or not getting? Oh, he was a good week, whatever. We did believe, for example, randomly sometimes saying, sure, we'll buy the game, and you'd look at us like, whoa. How did that happen? What was the secret sauce? I want to learn that again. I was like, no, parenting is random. I think there's something important about being random in your parenting too. But that's how we developed it. And then seeing you, for example, having your cookie stand if you want another game, and you worked your butt off for that. You got the money, you ran, you bought a game. That was cool. And we didn't like teach you must do this or whatever, or work hard for it or mow lawns. You just developed that yourself. So the work and financial ethic came pretty strong automatically with all of you. Afterwards. So we're very happy to hear that. We were worried about it. We didn't know if we got it right. Parents don't know.
The question then I think ultimately becomes like, how has the landscape changed, right? So how does the financial landscape change? How does the mature rating landscape change? So let's start, I guess, back a little bit, where with you and your parents, whether that be Opa Snaishival or that be Oman Opa, was there like a clear, like, you are not allowed to watch, I guess it was just R-rated and PG rated, I guess, and PG was basically R-rated to some degree anyway, considering the time. So I guess was there like a kind of distinct cutoff of these are the boundaries
Yeah,
that you weren't allowed to cross.
I think so, but it wasn't. I think the same with us. It wasn't like we would talk about it and get a whiteboard and explain and here are the boundaries. It was just
Most
there
people
was
haven't invited whiteboards yet. There was a
the
chalkboard, and you had
chalkboard.
to dust it off. Which is what you had with the one game. And then there's the dust in the chalk.
That's right. So there was no chalk. We didn't do a chalkboard day. Very good. We didn't work on the chalkboard, so I
Yeah,
can't remember. But we just knew. You kind of knew that you wanted your parents, approval anyways, and you knew where the lines were to be disapproved. And we were pretty good. I was a pretty good kid, I will say. I colored inside the lines pretty much. For a little
sure.
kid, that was weird, but I did do that. I will tell you this much though. I do remember I think it was 1971. So I'm 6 years old, and I vaguely remember this, but the Oma and Opa took me to see the movie The French Connection. Now, The French Connection is based on a true story, but anyways, it was a really cool. I think it was Oscar nominated, but it was about drug dealing out of France and into the U.S. and police chasing drug dealers kind of thing, right? And that was rated R. It had some really good juicy language that on the next day at school I used, um, and I got in trouble. I didn't realize, so that suddenly made the connection of, well, I probably shouldn't do that. It's like, where did I get it from? I got it from the movie I saw yesterday. So yeah, you quickly learn like, oh, that wasn't a good choice.
The French language connection
Yeah,
that you made.
call it French if you want. There was a lot of F bombs the next day at school with me, and I learned I got in trouble for that. So, but anyway,
Check it out, guys. I learned this new cool word.
well, I mean, I just thought it was part of lexicon. I don't really know. So, but anyway,
It's so funny to say. It's a visceral word. It's real gratifying when you say it.
yeah. So well, it is now when people cut me off
Yeah.
or whatever. But so to answer your question, I mean, that time they didn't limit me, but I think Opa really wanted to see the movie, and I was around. They had no babysitter, if you ask me, so I went with them. That's the only thing I can figure. But other than that, I mean, we knew what the boundaries were by virtue of mostly example. I think,
Sure.
parenting by example is extremely important. And that's what I'm getting at, is even with the monetary and the things that we had, I didn't have the newest, fanciest cars. We didn't have the fanciest phones either. Mom and I didn't, kind of project that image of we must have things as much as we'd like to. We just didn't. And I think you guys kind of reflected that as you became adults as well. So,
Yeah.
so overall, and whether that's our use of language or the movies you should see or whatever it is, again, you do know you've learned the boundary. You can cross it, not cross it. It's certain in your teenage years you're going to cross it on many things. We used to be, we finally told you got older teenagers. It's like, look, there are some things that we put boundaries on that if you cross once or twice, we're not going to freak out. Other ones will freak out right away. And I remember
Yep.
each one of you kids said, well, which is which? And the answer is we ain't going to tell you. So, so it was. Raising, I don't know. There's no
I mean, it's
formula.
interesting, but it's so because I was thinking about this a little bit, and Ashley and I have had the discussion about swearing in front of our son, and if we're going to do it, if we should try to manage it, and realistically, it's probably not going to happen because it just kind of comes out. And I think the concept of forbidden language outside of maybe some words, right, that are definitely more explicit than others, is kind of going away. And I think is becoming more normalized at a younger age. And I think in the next 40 or 50 years, you're going to see an F bomb on an official paper somewhere, so that someone's going to write on like an official college paper for non-ironic reasons. I'm sure it happens now
I'm
when
sure it
a
happens
student is
now.
pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it happens now, but it's gonna be written non-ironically and in a for all intents and purposes proper context,
Yeah.
right? And that's kind of a thing where like, do we even worry about not swearing in front of the kid? Do we just let them hear it? Like, we're trying to figure out what the boundaries even should be at this point, right? Because for us, it's like we don't swear. At least growing up as a kid, it's like don't swear. And now it's like, if our kid swears, it's going to be less of a conversation of don't swear and more of a conversation of learn where and when to do this, right? You don't do it in front of your grandma and grandpa. You don't do it in front of your Oma. You don't do it at school. And you don't do it in front of us. But I'm not going to worry probably past that too much.
But here's the irony. you know, because we're having this conversation, you know, it's something worthy of having a boundary.
Right. It's
And
interesting.
so you've already conceded that this is a negotiated point as opposed to, which is great. You know, it's great. How you resolve it is up to you. But you know, but you're having a conscious thought where maybe many parents don't. They just make the assumption, they say things, and really, at least you're being thoughtful about it, which is ironic. Again, the irony is like it's going to be normal. We shouldn't worry, except I'm going to worry about it. Like, okay, so the boundaries, in a way, I don't want to take credit for it, but the boundaries work. You understood that they
And
can have a boundary.
I don't think it's not the language. It's really honestly internally. I don't care because when my kid becomes our age, whatever, right? He's gonna swear. It's gonna happen, right? And so it's not really the language that is an issue. I mean, ultimately speaking, down the road in 40, 50 years, right? What I want imparted is the fact that my son should know boundaries exist
Mhm.
and how to read those boundaries
Absolutely.
when they're not explicitly told to you. Because I think that has
That's
implication in a work setting, in a school setting, and that sort of
That's the
thing.
theme of today's show. Exactly. It's kind of like that. That's what I'm saying. We set boundaries so you guys can learn that. You know, I don't think it's, I shouldn't say it's poor parenting or bad parenting, but you know, if you expect your kids simply to know the yes nos, but not the whys of
Yeah.
everything, then you really haven't done your job. It's like, I'm not impressed if your kid doesn't cuss. I'm impressed if your kid doesn't cuss because he realized it could offend somebody in the room and he read the room correctly. Now that takes more,
Right.
you know, emotional intelligence. I'm not, again, not knocking other people. I'm just saying, you know,
You're just roundabout knocking other people.
pretty much I tend to, you know,
Yeah.
apologize when I really know it's nothing personal. I'm just better than you.
Yeah.
But,
Right. Right. Right.
but yeah, actually, I don't care. I'm just saying our style is a matter of we would rather have you guys think it out yourself than
Right.
just know the answer is no, but I don't know why. So I do this because, right? You do it because you have a reason, not because we told you so. When you're younger, it's easier to say
Don't
we
get me wrong.
told you
There's
so.
plenty of those.
Oh
There
yeah.
were plenty of those going
Oh,
on. The plenty of because I think I mean at a certain point also the reason's not going to resonate with a 10-year old.
no, it's not.
Right. Like
It's an
it's just going to be like they're just not going to get it.
you got to set the boundary, but not everything is negotiable at a given point in
Right.
time. I'm the adult, and we do have to make that distinction. As you know, I mean, let me ask you. I mean, when you, as a parent, do you expect to be, you know, your child's friend first, or second, or third, or a friend at all? I mean, you know,
Oh,
what's
first, totally. Me and him are going to hit the bars. We're gonna cruise in. Yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah, right. So,
So
you know, I'm not here to like, yeah, I mean, I hope that you like me and I hope you respect me. I think that's the big thing. Establish
right.
that point of respect and test it sometimes both ways. You got to test it both ways. But you know, I don't, you know, I think that's the question as to, well, you know, at least you're having a plan or a thought about it, which is the whole reason again of this series of videos that we're doing is you're being thoughtful about it. And that's kind of how I did it. I kind of measured these things well before I had kids. How would I approach it? But
Mhm.
no, I'm not. I'm close with my friends or with my kids, you know, and I can be friendly, and I am a friend, of course. But I'm the dad first, which sometimes is not easy. Other times it's like I will literally take the bullet for you. Um, Literally, I can tell you a time that actually almost happened, right? So, and that would have been
Yeah. True.
you weren't there, but your two brothers, right?
Yeah.
I remember that moment, that second. That's what a dad does. A dad isn't here like, you know, we're going to be friends and hang out, which is also cool. The friends, your father is like, oh, I'll take the bullet with it. I don't even know why he said that. It was just without question. So I don't know. I mean, so at the end of the day, boundaries, I think, is really the theme, and we have to know what those
Sure.
are. Understanding what's, you know, what you can do within the means that you have, and still create the environment. You know, in retrospect, for example, with money, I'm glad we didn't do allowance, and you know, everything was about you have to earn enough or keep enough to buy a bicycle, and then things
Right.
became about money more than about living. And for you guys, it was like, don't worry about money, you'll learn it, but live it first. Like, we didn't want you to obsess about money, and I think that's what happened. None of you obsess about the money that I can tell. Obsess about the money, how much you have or shouldn't have, and instead enjoy life, but recognize it's an important part. I don't say that that
Right.
was by design. I'm not saying it's because of us or how we did it, but if you flip it another way, if you really get, and again, yes, I'm criticizing other parents for doing it wrong. I don't know, maybe not, but I just figured that, you know, if we kept measuring, here's the money you get, and then you can buy a bike after 2 months and whatever it is, rather than just say, don't worry about it, we'll get you a bike. We want you to
I
focus
think
on
that,
life.
I mean, I think there's value in that. I think growing up, I never really understood how to save, and that, reared its head later in my financial life,
Sure.
that I had to get around. But I don't necessarily disagree with you either, just because I think AJ and I had a conversation about this recently.
AJ, your brother.
Yeah, AJ, my brother. And he had said, we had a vague conversation about money, right? And he's very interested in, granted, he lives in a much, much more expensive place than I do. He lives in San Jose, whereas I live in Iowa. And he had mentioned that he needs, he enjoys, the financial opportunities that he can create for himself via either stock market trading or his own work that he's doing now. And he was perplexed by my lack of desire to do so. Right? We had an interesting back and forth where, he goes, well, why don't you want to, spend X amount of work in order to have it actually pay dividends for you? And, I was like, look, I need money to support my family, to support myself, and then support my hobbies in that order. Right. And if that's all taken care of, then I don't really need more money. And I think he understood where I was coming from. He's very respectful about, yeah, okay, no, I get that. That makes sense. But it's very definitely two different ways of thinking about finances.
I think, and because I kind of know him, I think with him, he's never been about money, really, growing up. Still isn't, as far as I know. It's not about flash or anything.
And to be fair, I don't think it's about money. I think it's about gaming the system.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's exactly what I was going to say. It's in that instance, and that's your brother's style. For him, it's a matter of whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to maximize it to my benefit.
Yep.
And that's exactly what he did in college. He had a very high IQ. He's extremely intelligent. He can do things, but he will look at the syllabus since third grade up until the day he graduated from college. He looks at the syllabus and says, what do I have to do to get a C? All I want is a C to pass the class. And he would calculate that and live by it and execute at it. Well, he could have gotten the A. He was like, I don't need it. So it was more the gaming the system to his benefit. And to his credit, I think that's good. But that's exactly what it is. It's more about him. It's a game for him. He's always trying to see if he can outplay the game. Always outplay the game. I'm glad he has other games to outwit rather than me and Mom now. He tried to do that all the time, and it was exhausting.
And I was just the accomplice. I was the distraction.
You were pretty much. Well, you did your own thing. I mean, you learned from it. You just didn't want to game the system. You just wanted to go finish your homework and go play. So you had a whole different thing. So. But yeah, so that's a different thing. But when it comes to finances, I'm glad that you guys understand that there's value in it, and you have to be smart about it to a certain degree. It's not like you can ignore it, but you don't obsess about it. Like, okay, I need to buy a bike. I'm going to do this. I need to buy a car. I'm going to do. Maybe it's good now, but I'm just saying I didn't want it to be driven like money was a thing. Life is a thing. People are a thing. Family is a thing. Friends are really a big thing, right? And so enjoy that, and we just didn't want you to obsess about things. So I think that was our goal, and to some degree, I think it worked. So I guess that's pretty much it for today, right?
I think that's about it. And I think, I think we kind of touched on a lot of interesting ideas about, boundaries for sure, but sort of how they're changing and how they're shifting across the spectrum of an evolving media landscape, across the evolving financial landscape, social land, just the whole idea that, 100 years ago, when you were born, obviously, things were very different in terms of how you just interacted with the world. Whereas today, and I think only going forward, it's going to get a lot harder, a lot faster. And I mean, you just got to make some rules up on the fly. That's what it seems like, more than anything else.
We got really good at that. Mom and I are good at we're flexible enough that way. We just make it up as we go along. Well, look, I think, there's a lot of things to be said in there. I think, talking about boomers, which I may be the last year of the boomer. I might be a Gen Xer. Depends on what you look at. And Mom, the same thing. So you look
Depends
at us.
on whatever conversation and argument you're trying to have.
Either way, I'm shoved as a boomer. So don't. So anyway, and then compared to where millennials and Gen Zers are, there's a whole different landscape, and I'm learning that. So we can talk about that maybe in the future if you want. But the structure of what we believe was success and what you guys believe was success is two different things. I'm starting to have an appreciation that, maybe you guys don't have it wrong. We were just nuts. Who knows? So we'll see how that one plays out.